It's hard to overstate the impact From Software has had on gaming. From birthing its own genre to acting as the inspiration for countless game developers, the studio's games have not only left their mark on how games are designed, but also how players interact with them. To celebrate the release of the studio's latest title, Elden Ring, here's the history of Soulsborne games. It would be remiss of me not to mention Kingsfield here, even though it's not truly classed as a Soulsborne. If anything, it's the first flame from which Soulsborne games were born. From its punishing difficulty and interconnected world to Souls staples like illusory walls and deliberate, precise combat, it's easy to draw a connection between Kingsfield and Dark Souls. There's also the matter of the Moonlight Greatsword, a weapon that appears in most of From Software's titles being in the game, so it's connected in more than a few ways. I didn't want to gloss over it completely before we got into Demon Souls, but for a deeper dive into Kingsfield and its legacy, check out this fantastic video from our very own Dave Control. In 2004, 29-year-old Hidetaka Miyazaki did the unthinkable. After years working for the American IT company Oracle, he quit and took a steep pay cut to become a game developer at From Software. While working on Armored Core at the company, he heard about another project the studio was working on, a fantasy title that wasn't exactly going smoothly. With a love of dark medieval fantasy, Miyazaki asked to join the team. Because it was in trouble, he saw it as an opportunity to make a game exactly how he wanted. It was already a failure in the company's eyes, so why not give it to the young upstart? No one would care if he messed it up a bit more. Wanting to steer clear of current trends and make a quote, game-like game that took players back to basics, Miyazaki changed pretty much everything about the project upon joining the Demon Souls team. On the surface, Demon Souls sounds like a standard action role-playing game. You create your character, choose a class, level up, and take on a bunch of bosses with a variety of weapons and even magic. But to describe it like that is doing it an enormous disservice. The magic of Demon Souls is how it's simultaneously obtuse, but also manages to explain a lot to the player. Instead of teaching mechanics through endless tutorials and going over story via lengthy cutscenes, its lessons are delivered through trial and error, by encouraging exploration and allowing the player to put things together themselves. The story is mostly told through item descriptions and cryptic conversations with NPCs, and as for gameplay, well... After telling you the basics, Demon Souls lets you loose in the various areas of Boletaria and up against the demons that reside within. You'll die a lot, and death has a consequence. Enemies you've killed respawn, your maximum health is lowered, and the souls, the crucial currency used to buy items and level up with, are lost. Only by making your way back to where you died can you pick up your remains, regain your lost loot, and continue on your perilous quest. If you really wanted to, you could even make it harder or easier on yourself by adjusting the world tendency in the game. Certain actions like killing bosses, invading or defeating other players, or being killed while in body form would affect your world tendency. White world tendency makes enemies easier to defeat, but they drop fewer rewards. Black tendency is more high risk, but comes with higher rewards. Demon Souls was tough, and From Software knew that. But not everyone did. The team downplayed its difficulty in meetings with Sony, fearing that the publisher would ask them to make it easier. Early reactions to Demon Souls were disastrous. Those who went hands-on with it at Tokyo Game Show came away distinctly unimpressed, and Shuhei Yoshida, then boss of Sony Worldwide Studios, said, "This is crap. This is an unbelievably bad game." Sony refused to publish it outside of Japan, but it found a home with Bandai Namco in Europe and Atlus in North America. While it was pretty well received in Japan, sales were slow, but in the West, it was a completely different story. It was critically acclaimed, and here at GameSpot, we even gave it our Game of the Year for 2009. Word of mouth spread about this infamously difficult but brilliant Japanese game, and sales steadily rose. Atlus revealed that it tripled its original sales estimate, and later Sony admitted that it made a huge mistake in refusing to publish it worldwide. Demon's Souls' difficulty was key to it developing such a strong community. In-game, there's a messaging system, but instead of being able to freely write, "There's an enemy behind this wall," you have to pick from a list of words and sentences to try and brute force together a sentence that gets the gist across. While a lot of messages are genuinely helpful, offering tips and pointing out hidden items, they're also a great way to troll others. There are also bloodstains on the ground everywhere. Activating them shows you the last few seconds of another player's life in-game before they were killed. People flocked to forums and websites like GameFAQs for help with its bosses, or if they got lost in the sprawl of Boletaria. And while the game allows you to play cooperatively with others, it wasn't the easiest to pull in a friend to help. Instead, the game promoted more anonymous cooperation. Players could leave a summon sign on the ground and wait for another player to pull them into their game for help. They could emote at each other, but communication was mostly done through action, defeating bosses together. At the PlayStation 5 event in June 2020, it was revealed that Bluepoint, the studio behind the Shadow of the Colossus remake, as well as countless other remakes and ports, would be remaking Demon's Souls as a PlayStation 5 launch day exclusive. The remake didn't change too much from the original game. Graphics were updated, and PlayStation 5 features like DualSense haptic feedback, 3D audio, and a photo mode were added. Minor tweaks were made, like healing items having weight so that you couldn't carry too many without becoming over-encumbered, as well as the addition of new weapons, armors, and items. Bluepoint added the Fractured World, a mirror mode that flipped the level layouts, as well as a secret door that was opened by finding 26 hidden coins in the game. Its secret was discovered by Twitch streamer and Soulsborne speedrunner Distortion 2 just a week after Demon's Souls released. Development on a follow-up to Demon's Souls didn't begin immediately. For months after its release, it was still widely thought of as a failure. Sony held the rights to Demon's Souls, but wasn't interested in making another game. After the game's sales picked up in the West, Bandai Namco and From Software formed a partnership to create another title. Dark Souls, the spiritual successor to Demon's Souls, would be the game that catapulted From Software into the spotlight. The Age of Fire is coming to an end. You play as the chosen undead and awaken in a land called Lordran at the end of the Age of Fire. Humanity has been cursed by the Dark Sign, and those afflicted cannot die, instead resurrecting over and over until they go mad, also known as hollowing. You're tasked with collecting 4 Lord Souls to either relink the First Flame to extend the Age of Fire, or let it die, so the world falls into the Age of Dark. Like Demon's Souls, the story isn't really explicitly told or over-explained beyond the opening cutscene, inspiring players to come together to discuss the lore implications of Lordran and its inhabitants, from the hollowed and the demons to the godlike creatures that once roamed the land. But unlike Demon's Souls, which has archstones in a hub world that would transport the player to different locations, the Dark Souls map is a huge, intricately connected one. After landing at Firelink Shrine, the safe hub of the game, players are free to explore the world, unlock shortcuts, and create checkpoints for themselves by finding and lighting the bonfires they come across. Walking around Lordran is an incredible feeling. From all over, you can see other areas that you'll likely shortly encounter. When you unlock shortcuts, the world just makes sense, that it exists and that you're slowly uncovering its secrets. In the beginning, you have one simple objective: ring the 2 bells of awakening. The path to getting there is up to you to uncover, but it won't be easy. Dangerous bosses, devious traps, and lots of dying lie in your way. While you can summon NPCs to aid you in boss fights, cooperative play with other humans was not only possible, but in some cases encouraged. Dark Souls introduced the Covenant system to the series, where players pledge to various factions and are rewarded by following the Covenant's rules, typically in online play. The Warriors of Sunlight, for example, is a covenant that promotes a bit of jolly cooperation between players and rewards new miracles as you advance through its ranks. Dark Souls was an immediate success when it launched for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, outselling Demon's Souls almost immediately. Strong sales guaranteed the release of the Artorias of the Abyss expansion, and fans lobbied for the game to come to PC. From Software was not very familiar with developing games for PC, however, and had issues with the PC port. Famously, the game's resolution was locked at 1024 by 720. A NeoGAF user named Durante fixed the issue by releasing a mod called DS Fix, which fixed the resolution and upped the frame rate to 60 frames per second. While Demon's Souls paved the way, Dark Souls was From Software's breakout hit. Despite launching alongside titans like Skyrim, Batman Arkham City, and Portal 2, it stood out from the other games of 2011 because it was simply unlike anything else. Demon's Souls, despite overperforming its estimates and being a beloved game, was still relatively niche and locked to PlayStation 3. Dark Souls was multi-platform, and it was most people's first Souls game, or it was at least the first time they'd heard of the franchise. It was blisteringly difficult, but the feeling of victory washed away all of the pain that you went through. Its world was bleak, but shimmers of hope shone through, and communities came together to unlock its every secret. Numerous games have tried to ape what Dark Souls did for gaming, with varying levels of success, and its name is still revered to this day, often cited as one of the best games ever made. Dark Souls 2 would be the first Souls game not to be directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki. Miyazaki had his hands full working on Bloodborne, but supervised Dark Souls 2, handing the reins over to Tomohiro Shibuya and Yui Tanimura. Development was not easy, with Tanimura explaining in the game's DesignWorks book that midway through development he took over as sole director and that the team had to rethink the entire game, changing roles for certain characters and fitting new locations into the map. Naturally, Dark Souls 2 shares a lot of similarities with Dark Souls, but differed in a few key ways. Drangleic was less interconnected and less interesting than Lordran, and the game's map was a little more linear. It was also made in a new engine, which improved its graphics, although that was debatable to some fans, and audio. Tweaks had been made to combat. Backstabs and parries were a little tougher to land, and some enemies would stop respawning after you killed them a certain number of times to discourage players from farming souls and over-leveling. Dark Souls 2 also has way more bosses, over 30 to Dark Souls 22, but a common complaint was that too many of them were just big lads in armor. The game experimented with elements of Demon's Souls, with players' max health being reduced if they died unless they found the Ring of Binding, which would limit just how much it would reduce. But once again, the game received universal critical acclaim, and a trilogy of DLC called The Lost Crowns was soon released. An updated version of the game was released for PS4, Xbox One, and PC, and came bundled with the DLC. It was called Dark Souls 2: Scholar of the First Sin. Its visuals were updated, enemies were moved around so the game acted almost like a remix of the vanilla game, and it was playable at 60 frames per second. But this version of the game came with a bug that had plagued PC players of the base game. Your weapon would degrade faster at higher frame rates because for some reason the degradation stat was tied to the game's frame rate. This wouldn't actually be fixed for over a year. Over time, fan sentiment towards Dark Souls 2 has definitely waned, although there's a great video essay by H Bomber Guy who argues that it's actually secretly really good. I really recommend you watch it. While not strictly a Souls title, Bloodborne shares a lot of its DNA with the franchise and is often thrown in with the rest, hence the catch-all name Soulsborne. Development on the project began sometime in 2012 under the name Project Beast. Sony, still kicking themselves about dropping Demon Souls, came to From Software to ask to collaborate on another game for the upcoming PlayStation 4 console. Set in the decrepit, rotting city of Yharnam on the night of the hunt, where hunters purge the beasts that roam its streets. The only problem is, these beasts were once residents, and it's up to you to try and find answers to the plague that's overtaken the city and escape the nightmare you found yourself in. Bloodborne shunned the fantasy setting of demons and Dark Souls and instead leans into gothic horror and the terror of Lovecraftian cosmic beings. A new stat called Insight unlocks your mind to the true horrors of Yharnam, and as you progress through the game, these cosmic beings or Great Ones become visible to you. Bloodborne is very similar to the Souls games in a number of ways, but when it comes to combat, it's a completely different beast. While Souls promotes a more measured, cautious approach, blocking and waiting for openings from behind a shield, Bloodborne encourages aggression. When you're hit by an enemy, a short window opens where doing damage to the person that hit you gives you back health, pushing the player to attack rather than cower and regroup. Your weapons now transform, and stacking combos together feels fluid and powerful. Shields were removed from the game, well, save one wooden shield that calls you a coward for picking it. Replacing it in your left hand is a gun. When fired at just the right time, it stuns the enemy and opens them up for a visceral attack, which deals extra damage. Bloodborne was, and this may surprise you, critically acclaimed upon release and was quickly referred to as the best PlayStation 4 exclusive game and a true killer app for the console. It was added to PlayStation Now and later to the PlayStation Plus collection on PlayStation 5, but still nothing about a PC release. A few months after it came out, it received a meaty DLC expansion called The Old Hunters, which takes players back in time and up against a whole host of new bosses. As with other Souls games, Bloodborne's difficulty was key to helping its community grow. Not only were people coming together to learn how to beat the game normally, it has a strong speedrunning community, with players figuring out how to beat it in the fastest time and even doing runs without taking any hits. Bloodborne's cut content also intrigued folks to come together to mine every last secret they could from the game. Its first trailer showed a lot of mechanics and weapons that didn't actually make it into the final product, and players have combed through its code to uncover cut bosses, locations, and bits of story. It's been 7 years since Bloodborne was released, and people are still finding things. Dark Souls 3 was to be a culmination of everything From Software had learned while creating its other games. Directed by Miyazaki but co-directed by Dark Souls 2's Yui Tanimura and Isamu Okano, who had previously directed Steel Battalion Heavy Armor and was a game designer on Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3 was to straddle the line of being both familiar but push new ground for the studio. Speaking at E3 2015, Miyazaki said that Dark Souls 3 wouldn't be the final product for the Dark Souls franchise, but instead act as a turning point for the series and for From Software as a whole. Its story follows similar beats and themes of the previous games, and its combat, while very familiar to those who had played previous Souls games, is a little faster and dynamic. Archery was much improved, with Miyazaki revealing that the team at From was inspired by Legolas from Lord of the Rings. The game introduces a new stat, luck, and weapon arts, special skills that can give you the edge in a fight, like breaking an enemy's guard or dealing more damage. Dark Souls 3 aimed to encourage a greater sense of exploration. Its map was bigger, but also fairly interconnected in a way that fans had loved in Dark Souls and Bloodborne. Despite some technical issues and a rough frame rate at launch, it was very well received by fans and critics who, emboldened by their experience with Bloodborne and its aggressive combat, praised the faster fights in Dark Souls 3, as well as the gorgeous world of Lothric. Some complained that the game didn't feel as fresh or exciting as previous titles, lacking surprise and relying too heavily on series mainstays. Regardless, it was the fastest-selling game in Bandai Namco's history, and 2 pieces of DLC, The Ringed City and Ashes of Ariandel, were released. Dark Souls 3 might not have moved the needle as much as some Souls fans hoped, but From Software's next game, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, would be a vast departure for the studio, an action-adventure game more in line with Tenchu than Dark Souls. As it's not a Soulsborne, I'll not dwell on it too much, but it's really fun to chart the changes the studio made to its games as their approach to game design evolved over time. Which brings us to Elden Ring, which looks to be a culmination and evolution of the Soulsborne games so far, taking the core tenets of Dark Souls and setting players loose in an expansive open world and letting them make their own path. A Song of Ice and Fire author George R.R. Martin contributed to the game's lore, with Miyazaki taking up the reins as director once again. New is the ability to ride a mount, a spectral steed named Torrent, as well as crafting using materials you've gathered from enemies and the environment. The lands between it looks to be huge, and players need to collect map shards to unfog the map to explore. Not only can you play cooperatively with people online, but in certain areas you can summon spirit ashes, spectral beings that attack enemies for you. Borrowing from Sekiro, you can stealth through various areas, and even jump, offering more ways to dispatch enemies. Elden Ring has been delayed a couple of times, but is finally launching in 2022, and I can't wait. So there you have it, the history of Soulsborne games. For more From Software, make sure to keep your eyes peeled to GameSpot, and be sure to let me know which one is your favorite in the comments below. You can find me on Twitter, I'm at LucyJamesGames, and thanks for watching.